I am Lisa M. Lilly, author and podcaster. This video is to show a little bit behind the scenes as my latest QC Davis crime novel slash mystery, The Skeptical Man, is about to be released. And for those of you who are watching who are on my nonfiction list for writing craft, this goes into a little bit of how those major plot turns I talk about play into the planning process. For those who are just interested in the mysteries, there's a little bit of background here. I will do my best not to spoil anything if you have not read the book yet. So let me share my screen and we'll go to the program I use when I am writing. And this is new for me. I used to write in Microsoft Word. And earlier versions did not handle entire novels really well. You can see if I just click on manuscript here, my books are usually around this 80,000 to 85,000 words, sometimes a little bit less. And that got cumbersome. I used to split my documents into 4 parts. And then I discovered Scrivener. I used it for nonfiction. This is the first time I've written an entire novel in it. And there's some things that are just great for the writing process that help me show what it is I do to start out. So research is a folder that's already there in the Scrivener setup for writing fiction. And you can see, I don't actually use this one, sample output, but I created each of these for things that I researched. And most of this happened before I started writing in a phase that 2 phases. One, what I call pre-research, where I just read things that interest me. And if I think that it might come in handy in the next book I'm writing, I will take some notes on it. So this one, insulin pumps, I saw something on, I think on television, about how these pumps can be remote controlled now. And it's really great because they can be more finely tuned to what the patient needs. But there's also a risk because you could, in theory, hack into it, or there could be a mistake. And I thought, oh, wow, that would be a way to kill someone. I am a really nice person, but these are the things I think about. So I put articles and other things that I found here, along with, you'll see, various links. That did not end up in this book, might end up in some previous book. Hopefully I haven't spoiled anything for you. One thing that did end up, I had this idea that the 606 would be where the murder would take place. And the 606 is an elevated trail, park area that runs through a few neighborhoods in Chicago. In fact, you can see these: Wicker Park, Bucktown, Humboldt Park, and Logan Square. It's modeled after the High Line in New York City, if you've ever walked that, and the Promenade de Planté in Paris. The one in Paris is especially amazing. And I just thought it would be a cool place to have my victim encounter someone. Probably later, it turns out to be on a Sunday evening, more like 9:30, and there might not be too many people around. So I did some looking. One, I needed to know exactly what neighborhoods and where can you get on to the 606. So as I learned, there are 12 access points. And then basically what was up there. So I watched some videos of it. I had taken a walk through it. I got the idea years ago during the pandemic lockdown. For a while, that was closed off too, but then they opened it and I took a walk through, but I hadn't been there in a while. So I looked at videos, I looked up information, and that all went in here. Some of this I add to during the writing process when I discover I need a little more info. That's called just-in-time world building, where you create what you need, but as you write, you then start filling in the blanks. So I do a bit of both, rather. You can see some other things. I researched sibling murders. I had an idea that one suspect would be the brother. There's a number of suspects. I'll come back to some of these other things. But then I'll show you notes. So these are various things, not necessarily research, although that gets mixed in. It's more like my ideas. Cause of death, I won't click on because it might reveal some things, but you'll see later some of the other info in here. And this was ideas about book descriptions that I came up with before writing the book. That was an experiment to see, could I pick out what was going to be important about it? So I love all of that. Plot rewrite notes is for after that first draft, but I created it while I was writing the first draft with notes about maybe I'll want to rethink X or Y. And then when I read through the first draft, I took some more specific notes. The other thing I use before actually writing is the characters. Scrivener does a template for you. I don't always use it. I did use this in for the victim. And you notice I never did get around to filling in the names, even though obviously I knew them later. But when I first wrote about them, I wasn't sure what their names would be. And I've got some background, some of which ends up in the book, some of which does not. And you see, I have a few things where I put in links to ideas. And you'll see here, suspect, 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 suspect. So these were the ideas of who might be the ones who killed my victim. This part, manuscript, will tell you a little more about that planning versus first drafting process. Again, I won't reveal anything that will spoil it. I love in Scrivener, each of these is a quarter of the book. So I created these folders. And those of you who have read my books on plot or listened to my Buffy and the Art of Story podcast know that the major plot turns I talk about happen a quarter way through the book, halfway through the book, and at the 3/4 mark. And then there is the climax. And I talk about a couple other major points too, but those are big ones where there are turns that really shift the story. And one of the things Scrivener allows me to do is look at the word count for each one. Now, when I am writing, I kind of keep an eye on that roughly. If it's taking me forever to get to that 1/4 turn, I don't necessarily make a change at that point, but I might think about, hey, am I putting in too much background? Should some of this happen later? Does some of this not need to be here? You can see in the final version, the first quarter is about a little over 20,000, almost 21,000 words. The second quarter is short of that. It's 19,317. Third quarter, we're back to 20,580. Fourth quarter, 20,929. So it isn't exactly, I have had books that felt exactly the same, give or take 20 words or so. Other ones vary a little bit, but I, on rewrite, make sure it doesn't vary widely. Why? Not because I think readers count the words, but because that provides a very natural flow to the story. And if 1/4 is really out of proportion, the pacing is probably off. And the other thing I like with Scrivener, so here, each of these now is a chapter. In earlier drafts, my first draft, each was a scene. So there was a much longer list here and they got combined. But it allows moving around. So let's say I'm looking at, hey, what's going to happen here? And there's a scene, Quill interviews a suspect, and that interview could happen in either quarter of the book. If one is very long, I might take it. You can actually, I'm not going to do it here because I don't want to mess this up. This is the final, but I could move it down or up into the other quarter. Of course, I've got to make adjustments that has to fit the plot, but with a mystery in particular, sometimes there are certain interview scenes or in background, I shouldn't say background, that sounds boring, visit the scene of where it happened or visit the office of somebody. And that could happen roughly in the same part of the book, but could move around a little. So I can do that. The other thing that's nice is you can title each of your scenes. So like I said, I probably had double the amount here. And these were not titles like The Murder Wish, which I'm particularly fond of. The initial title for the first scene was something like Quill in Office, uh, overworked, feeling sad, her boyfriend's away, gets a call from a judge about a murder. That was a very long, just telling me what was going to happen. And I used this as a way to do a rough outline. Before it had twice the number here, there was a Q1 and maybe 4 things listed here as scenes that weren't even filled in yet. That gave me a rough idea. And then I thought about, okay, what happens at that 1/4 turn? What shifts the story? And why. And then I filled in some blanks there. Then when I did my rewrite, as I got closer and closer to the final version, I figured out what went in what chapter and then gave them a little catchier title. So I really like that one. I like Family Business. I do like all of them, but some I'm particularly fond of. Interview with a Brother. For some reason, I like. Oh, I shouldn't keep clicking because I'm gonna give you little glimpses. But anyway, this is the starting chapter, and I called it The Murder Wish because if you've been reading while I talk, you see Quill is thinking, I need a murder because she is just having a rough summer. And part of why she is so overloaded is she just investigated the murder of her sister. It was a cold case murder. She devoted all this time to it for her family. And there was some fallout that made it really rough for her emotionally. Her boyfriend's away for a couple years. They're trying long distance. And all she is doing is working, working, working through her favorite season in the summer in Chicago. And she's missing out on things. And she wishes for a murder because it would be something to investigate, which is exciting to her. And then she feels like a terrible person because she has that thought. So that is why the murder wish, and gives us a clue like, yes, guess what's going to happen? She's going to get a call about a murder. So let me close these up again. And I want to go back to at least one thing here that you might have noticed and wondered about. Oh, it is not here. I think it is in notes. There's a reference to ChatGPT. I did experiment a little bit with using ChatGPT, which is the open AI you can use for free. There are paid versions too. I have not tried them. And I wanted to see, okay, what can it do? And generally, I used it a few times, mostly as a research assistant to say, okay, I'm creating a family business. It's going to be a pizza restaurant. Tell me about iconic pizza restaurants in the Chicago area. And I gave it names of companies here like Giordano's, Lou Malnati's, and said, look at the histories and tell me, what would you have in the history of an imaginary iconic Chicago pizza restaurant? And I also told it, here's who's the grandfather is, who started it, here's where he immigrated from, and some other details. And it was helpful to have ChatGPT go out and kind of pull that information and compile it for me. I also, you see this bartender chat GPT description. I can't even remember what I had it do. I think I might have been struggling with the nuts and bolts of that scene and thought, okay, give me, what would you write? Quill interviews a bartender in this kind of a pizza place with this kind of a bar. I did it more for what's the ambiance here. And most of it I didn't use. I saved the originals just so I can go back and see how much ends up in the book. Almost none of it. And I found more value using ChatGPT in it giving me something, and I would say, oh no, absolutely not. That's not what I'm looking for. It tended a little bit towards, if I didn't give enough direction, kind of a stereotype. And then I could add something and say, oh no, this bartender is an artist, and here is why he's working at this bar. But ultimately, I threw out almost everything other than a few details that were helpful. So I did that maybe 3 or 4 times throughout this 80,000 plus word novel. It was an interesting experiment. I could see using it as a research tool and as a way to generate a paragraph or two as a jumping off point. Ultimately, I'm not someone who wants to have ChatGPT write books for me. I love writing. I love the process. So that is not something I want to outsource. But some of the mechanics of combing the internet to find info, I would love to outsource some of that. Not all, however, because that pre-research and that research is what gives me ideas. I'm going to stop sharing now. So that is a little bit of insight into how I create a plot and then what happens when I go into the first draft and what I do on rewrite. I hope you found that helpful. If you're a writer, if you're a fan of the series, I hope you enjoyed that behind the scenes look at the process and that I didn't give anything away. If you want to get the Skeptical Man, you can find links on my website at Lisa Lilly, that's LISALILLY.com/skeptical. Thanks for tuning in.